I was on Providence Road in my old white van, the one with the faded plumbing company logo still ghosted on the side, when I heard a hard thump from the back. Then, another one. Then, water sloshing like a bathtub had tipped over behind me. I checked the mirror and saw the blue strap around my water tank flapping loose. "Come on," I said, like the van cared. I cut across 2 lanes, got honked at by a woman in a Lexus, and pulled into the first gas station I saw. By the time I opened the back doors, my shirt was sticking to me, and one of my towels had fallen into a puddle under the tank. The strap hadn't snapped. It had just slipped from the cheap metal hook I kept promising myself I would replace when I had money. That was how my whole business worked back then. Everything was temporary. Everything was good enough until Friday. I braced one knee against the tank, pulled the strap tight, and tied the end in a knot so ugly I didn't even want to look at it. Then I checked my phone. 3 missed calls, all from the same number. I stared at the screen and felt my stomach drop. This was not a regular driveway wash. This was my first real chance at a rich client. A luxury SUV at a gated property in South Charlotte. Listing photos at 1 o'clock. Realtor people. Staging people. Clean glass. Perfect paint. No excuses. I called back while climbing into the driver's seat. A woman answered on the second ring. "Noah?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm so sorry. I had an equipment issue, but I'm 5 minutes out." "You were 5 minutes out 12 minutes ago." I closed my eyes for half a second. "Yes, ma'am. That's true." There was a pause. Not long, but long enough for me to picture her telling me to turn around. Then she said, "Just get here safe. The gate code is 4412. When I reached the property, the gate opened to a driveway that looked cleaner than my kitchen floor. The house was huge, without looking loud. White brick, black windows, trimmed hedges, stone planters. The whole thing set up like somebody had measured the air. A black luxury SUV sat in the circular drive, already catching the sun in every dirty spot. Watermarks on the glass, dust along the lower panels, cream leather visible through the windshield, a small scuff near the rear door, and Laura was standing beside it. She had red hair pulled back low, sunglasses on top of her head, and a cream blouse that looked expensive in a way I couldn't explain. She didn't look rushed, exactly. She looked like the kind of person who could be rushed without letting anyone see it. I parked near the edge of the drive, jumped out, and almost tripped over my own hose. "Laura?" I asked, even though I knew. She looked me over once, not in a mean way. More like she was checking whether I was about to fall apart. "Noah." "I'm sorry," I said. "I know I'm late. My tank strap came loose on the road. That's not your problem. I can still get it done before the shoot." Her mouth tilted, like she was trying not to smile. "You're sweating through your apology." "I'm sweating through everything right now." That got a small laugh out of her. "Okay," she said. "You're late, but you made it. Walk with me." She showed me the SUV like she was giving me a tour of a crime scene. Exterior wash, wheels, wheel wells, glass inside and out, cream leather seats, cargo area, and the scuff near the rear door. "That scuff needs to disappear if it can," she said. "The photographer is shooting wide from this side." "I can improve it," I said. "If it's paint transfer, I can probably remove most of it. If it's deeper, I'll make it less visible." She turned her head toward me. "Most people say, no problem. Most people aren't standing next to the problem yet." She studied me for a second, then nodded. "Good. Start." So I did. Once my hands were moving, I stopped feeling like I was about to lose the job. That was the only place I felt normal back then. Hose out, foam cannon connected, brushes lined up on a clean towel, extension cord tucked where nobody would step on it. I rinsed the SUV from the top down, working fast, but not sloppy. I cleaned the wheels first, because dirty water always runs where it wants. I used the soft brush inside the wheel wells and kept checking the time without trying to make it obvious. Laura went inside, but she didn't stay there. The first time she came back out, I was taping off the black trim near the scuff before polishing. You tape that for one little mark? She asked. If I stain the trim, you'll see that instead of the scuff. She crossed her arms, watching. The second time, I was leaning sideways, checking the paint in the reflection of the garage window. What are you looking for now? Whether the mark is actually gone or just wet. She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell something clean and sharp, like citrus and expensive soap. You always this serious about cars? I'm serious about people paying me. That's not the same answer. I glanced at her, then went back to the paint. It is when you're new. She didn't say anything after that, but she stayed outside a little longer. The SUV took me almost 2 hours. I cleaned the cream leather carefully, especially the driver's seat where blue denim had left a faint shadow on the side bolster. I got the glass clear, dressed the tires without making them greasy, and worked the scuff until it faded into the black paint like it had never been there. When Laura inspected it, she didn't do that fake client thing where they barely look and say fine. She looked at everything, ran her eyes over the lower panels, leaned toward the rear door, checked the glass from an angle. Then she looked at me. You fixed the mark. Paint transfer. You said most of it. I like leaving room in case I'm wrong. She smiled then. For real. I have one more thing. Of course she did. One more thing turned into a silver coupe inside the garage that needed the dust blown out of the vents and the fingerprints cleaned from the doors. Then it was a stone bench outside with dark marks on one side. Then a patio table with cloudy spots because it was going to be in the background of the photos. Each thing was small. Each thing kept me there. By the time I packed up, the photographer had arrived. 2 agents were walking around with tablets, and the house looked like nobody had ever lived in it. I was tired, hungry, and still worried my tank strap would give up on the drive home. Laura came out with a cold bottle of water and handed it to me. You didn't have to do the bench, she said. You asked. I asked like a person who expected you to say you were booked. I'm not booked enough to say that. She looked at the van, then at me. At least you're honest. Sometimes by accident. She laughed softly and took one step closer. Not too close. Just enough that I noticed. You were worth waiting for, Noah. I didn't have anything smart to say to that. I just held the cold bottle in my hand and nodded like I hadn't heard it land somewhere it shouldn't. Driving away, I told myself I wanted her to call again because I needed the money. That was true. It just wasn't the whole truth. 3 days later, I was parked behind a strip mall on South Boulevard eating a gas station turkey sandwich when Laura called. I almost dropped the sandwich into my lap trying to answer. Hello? Noah, she said. Are you busy tomorrow morning? I looked through my windshield at the empty parking lot, the stack of flyers on my passenger seat, and the appointment calendar that had exactly one oil-stained minivan written on it for the afternoon. Depends what you need. I need a car cleaned and a driveway treated before 11. Different property. Showing at noon. I sat up straighter. What kind of stain? Small dark patch near the garage. The owner says it's from a contractor's truck. The agent says it looks awful in photos. I say everyone is dramatic, but I still need it gone. I can handle that. You sure? I looked back at my van like the answer was hiding in the dents. Yes. Good. I'll text the address. She hung up before I could say thank you, which was probably for the best because I would have said it too hard. The next morning, I got there 20 minutes early. I wasn't playing around this time. I checked the tank strap twice before leaving my apartment. I packed extra towels, extra brushes, 2 kinds of degreaser, and the better pressure washer nozzle, even though it leaked at the handle. The property was in Myers Park, tucked back behind trees and old brick walls, the kind of house where even the shade looked expensive. Laura was already there, standing in the driveway with her phone in one hand and a roll of blue painter's tape in the other. You're early, she said. I wanted to try something new. She smiled without looking all the way up from her phone. Careful, it might become a habit. The car was a white SUV this time, not as high-end as the first one, but still cleaner than anything I owned. The driveway stain was exactly where she said it would be, near the garage, dark and ugly on the pale concrete. I got down on one knee to look at it. Laura stood beside me. "Well, not oil," I said. "Looks like tire shine or dressing, maybe mixed with dirt. It'll lift." "You can tell by looking and by hoping I'm not wrong." She laughed under her breath. I sprayed the spot, let the cleaner dwell, brushed it in, rinsed it carefully so I didn't splash dirty water toward the garage door. Then I did it again because the first pass wasn't enough. Laura watched from the edge of the driveway, phone tucked under her arm now. "You don't rush the boring parts," she said. "Boring parts are where people notice mistakes." "Most people don't think like that. Most people have better jobs." She tilted her head. "You don't like what you do?" I kept brushing because it was easier than looking at her. "I like doing it. I don't like wondering if it's going to survive every week." That was more honest than I meant to be. She didn't answer right away. I heard her heels click once on the concrete as she shifted her weight. "How many jobs do you need a week?" she asked. "To not panic?" "Yes. 8 small ones, 4 good ones, 2 great ones, and a miracle." She made a soft sound, not quite a laugh. "That's a strange business plan." "That's not the plan. That's the weather report." When I finished, the stain had faded enough that you had to know where to look. I washed the SUV, cleaned the wheels, wiped the door jambs, and cleared the inside glass. Laura checked the driveway from 3 different angles, then looked toward the street where the agent's sign had just gone up. "That will work," she said. "Actually, that will more than work." I tried not to look too relieved. After that, the calls started coming in closer together. At first, it was all practical. A realtor's SUV before a client lunch. Patio furniture at a staged house in Dilworth because pollen had coated the black metal chairs. A classic green convertible that belonged to a homeowner who wanted it sitting in the driveway for a private showing, like a prop from a life most people only pretended to have. Laura would text short, clean messages. "Can you be at Queens Road at 8? Need glass and wheels only. Tight window. Bring something for outdoor cushions. Staging van looks terrible. Don't judge me." I always answered too fast. I knew I did. I'd see her name, and my thumb moved before my pride had a chance to act calm. The staging van was the worst one. It was parked behind her warehouse near Noda, a tall white cargo van packed with folded rugs, fake plants, lamps, side tables, rolled fabric, and about 10,000 pieces of lint. The inside smelled like cardboard, dust, and furniture polish. Laura opened the back doors and gave me a look. "I told you not to judge me." "I'm not judging," I said. "You're absolutely judging. I'm organizing my thoughts. My team uses it every day. It gets away from us. I can see that." She pointed at me with the key fob. "Careful, Noah." I grinned before I could stop myself. That was the first time I felt like I wasn't just trying to keep a client happy. We were talking like we had a rhythm, even if I didn't fully trust it yet. I vacuumed that van for almost 3 hours. Fabric lint stuck to everything. Dust came out of the cargo mats in gray waves. I wiped down shelves, cleaned cup holders, scrubbed black marks off the plastic trim, and pulled 3 missing tape rolls from under a seat. Laura came out halfway through with iced coffee. "You eat lunch?" she asked. "Sometimes." That's not an answer. It's the answer my bank account gives. She handed me the coffee, then stayed leaning against the side of the van. "How did you start this? The business?" "No, Noah. I mean your secret life as a van philosopher." I looked at her. She smiled. I took a drink to buy myself a second. "I worked at a body shop for a while, then a dealership detail bay. I was good at it, but I got tired of making other people's cars look perfect while I stayed broke. So I bought this van, used equipment, printed ugly flyers, and convinced myself fear was motivation." "That sounds exhausting." "It is. Why do you talk about it like survival is the best you're allowed to hope for? That one hit harder than I expected. I went back to wiping the inside of the rear door. Because survival comes first. Does it have to stay first? I didn't answer, because the real answer was I didn't know how to think past it. My extractor was old. My generator coughed every time I started it. My van looked like it belonged behind a building, not in front of a luxury listing. I couldn't take two big jobs at once. I couldn't say yes to fleets. I couldn't hire help unless I knew money was coming in. And money was always almost coming in. Laura listened when I explained that. Not like she was waiting for her turn to talk. She listened like she was collecting details. Your setup is holding you back, she said. My setup is the only reason I have anything. Both can be true. That sounded like something a person said when they had never had to choose between replacing a pump and paying rent. But I didn't say that. I just shrugged and kept working. A week later, a man named Bradley called me and said Laura had sent him. He had 2 SUVs and wanted weekly washes. Then a woman in Eastover called about her husband's sports car. Then an agent asked if I could be available every Friday morning for pre-showing driveway touch-ups and glass cleaning. All of them said her name like it was a key that opened the door. Laura said, "You're careful." Laura said, "You show up." Laura said, "You know paint." Suddenly, I was driving through neighborhoods I used to only pass through slowly, wondering what kind of people lived behind those gates. Now I was pulling in with a clipboard, a hose, and invoices that actually got paid on time. The first day I brought Luis on, he climbed into the passenger seat holding a biscuit sandwich and looked around my van like he was inspecting a sinking boat. "Man," he said, "where did all this work come from?" I started the engine. A good referral. He chewed, nodded, then looked at the schedule taped to the dash. "One referral got you all this?" I didn't answer right away. We had 3 houses that day. 2 SUVs, 1 patio set, a garage floor rinse, and a black sedan that needed polish on the hood, all connected to Laura in one way or another. "Yeah," I said finally, "a really good one." But even as I said it, I knew that sounded too small. Because it wasn't just work anymore. It was Laura standing in a driveway with her arms crossed, watching how I handled a problem. It was her asking questions nobody asked unless they saw something worth measuring. It was her name making people trust me before I even arrived. And it was me, checking my phone at the end of every long day, hoping the next message was from her for business. And not only business, the night everything changed started with a seller who changed his mind at the worst possible time. It was one of Laura's biggest listings that month, a glassy place near Lake Norman with a pool, a long driveway, and rooms so clean they made you feel like breathing too hard would leave a mark. The showing was supposed to be the next morning. Her crew had been there all day, placing furniture, hanging art, steaming curtains, wiping fingerprints off cabinets that probably cost more than my van. I was there for the driveway and the entry glass. Simple job. That was what I thought when I pulled in at 4:30. By 6, Simple was gone. The owner had called Laura and moved the private showing up. Not by a day. Not by a few hours. To 8:30 that night, because some buyer from Atlanta was only available then, which sounded like rich people nonsense to me. But Laura took the call without blinking. She stood in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, one hand resting on the white island, her red hair coming loose around her face. "No," she said calmly. "We can make it work." I was outside coiling a hose when I saw her through the window. Her face stayed smooth, but her shoulders changed. Just a little, like somebody had put a weight across them. 10 minutes later, she came out to the driveway. "Noah," I turned. "Yeah? I know you're technically done." That was never a good opening. I looked at the house, then at the sky getting darker behind it. What happened? Showing got moved to tonight. I almost laughed because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. Tonight? In about 2 hours? I looked past her at the patio furniture still stacked near the side gate, the entry glass with fresh fingerprints from movers, the outdoor chairs that had dust on the legs, and a dark strip on the driveway where my rinse water had dragged mulch dirt across the concrete. You need help. I need a miracle with a pressure washer and decent judgment. I've got one of those. The miracle or the judgment? Depends who's asking. For the first time that evening, she smiled. Then we moved. I don't mean we worked slow and pretty. We moved like the house was on a timer because it was. I rinsed the driveway again, quick but clean, pushing dirty water away from the garage and toward the street. Laura dragged 2 patio chairs into place before I could tell her they might scuff the stone. I wiped them down after her. She held the ladder while I polished the tall entry glass. I cleaned a black mark near the front step. She fixed pillows on a sofa through the window, then came back outside with a basket of towels. At one point, she passed me so close her arm brushed mine. "Sorry," she said. "You're fine." "I'm not, but thank you." I looked at her then. She was still put together, still Laura, but not untouchable. There was a streak of dust on her sleeve, and one strand of hair stuck to her cheek. I had seen her in perfect houses, giving perfect instructions, but that night she looked like someone holding the whole thing together with both hands. By 8:10, the house was ready enough to fool anybody. The buyer was delayed anyway, because of course he was. Laura got the call, listened, and closed her eyes. 45 minutes, she said. Wonderful. She hung up, leaned both hands on the kitchen island, and let out one quiet laugh that had no humor in it. I was standing near the sink, wiping my hands with a towel. "You want me to clear out?" She looked up. "Do you have somewhere better to be?" I thought about my apartment, my unpaid phone bill, and the half-empty fridge. "No." "Then stay. I'm ordering food." We ate takeout in that staged kitchen under lights that made everything look softer than it was. The food came in brown paper bags. We sat on stools that still had tags under the seats. Laura kicked off her heels and lined them under the island, like she was breaking her own rules. She handed me iced tea and a container of noodles. "You saved me tonight," she said. I cleaned some glass and pushed water around. "Noah," I looked at her. "Take the compliment." So I did. Badly. "Thanks." She smiled and shook her head. For a few minutes, we just ate. The house was quiet around us. Not home quiet. Showroom quiet. Like everything was pretending. Then, Laura said, "You know what I noticed about you? That I eat like I missed lunch?" "You probably did." "I did. I noticed that you walk into expensive homes like you're apologizing for being there." I stopped with the fork halfway to my mouth. "I don't." "You do." I set the container down. "I'm careful." "No. Careful is how you work. Apologizing is how you stand." That bothered me because I knew she was right, and I didn't like that she could see it. "I'm not from this world," I said. "Most people aren't from the world they're trying to enter." "I'm not trying to enter it." She looked at me over the rim of her iced tea. "No?" I should have said no again. I should have laughed it off, packed my towels, and left before the buyer got there. Instead, I said, "You make it hard to remember I'm supposed to leave." Write in the comments, was Noah right to cross that line with Laura? Or should he have kept things professional once she became the client who could change his whole business? The kitchen went still. Laura put her cup down slowly. Her eyes stayed on mine, not surprised exactly, but focused, like I had finally said something she had already heard coming. "That's honest," she said. "It was probably stupid. Not always the same thing." My heart was beating too fast for a room that quiet. She stood and walked around the island. Not fast, not dramatic. Just a few steps until she was close enough that I had to tilt my head down a little to look at her. "You can leave," she said, "or you can stop pretending this is only about work." I didn't move for 1 second. Then I did. The kiss wasn't careful. That surprised me. I had been careful around her for weeks. Careful with my words, my tools, my eyes, my invoices, my whole place in her life. But when she kissed me back, all that carefulness disappeared. Her hand caught the front of my shirt. Mine went to her waist. The staged kitchen, the late showing, the buyer from Atlanta, my van outside with wet towels in the back, all of it moved far away. Later, when the buyer finally canceled for good and the house stayed empty, I didn't leave. I'm not going to dress it up like I had a plan. I didn't. I just knew that when morning came, I woke up with sunlight cutting across the unfamiliar room and Laura beside me, and I felt both calmer and more afraid than I had in a long time. The strange part was what happened after. She didn't act weird. She didn't turn cold. She didn't say we needed to talk like I had broken some rule I hadn't known about. She made coffee in the kitchen, wearing one of those soft gray sweaters from her staging bag, and asked what time my first job was. 9, I said. Then you need to leave by 8:15. I watched her pour coffee into 2 paper cups. That's it? She looked at me. What were you expecting? I don't know. Yes, you do. I rubbed the back of my neck. I thought maybe you'd regret it. Her face softened, but only a little. Noah, I make enough decisions in a day to know when I've made one. That line stayed with me too. After that, Laura still called for work, still sent me addresses, still corrected agents on the phone while pointing me toward a garage stain, still introduced me to homeowners like I belonged there. This is Noah, she'd say. He's the one I trust. Not the guy who washes cars. Not my detailer. The one I trust. And because she didn't make things awkward, I started wanting more than I knew how to ask for. More time after jobs. More calls that weren't about schedules. More of her looking at me like I was not temporary. But the business was growing faster than my equipment could handle. My extractor clogged during a tan carpet job in Ballantyne, and I spent 20 minutes behind the van, taking it apart while the homeowner kept checking her watch. The generator started coughing under load. My water tank took forever to refill. Luis and I were working out of one messy setup, passing tools back and forth like 2 guys sharing one umbrella in a storm. One afternoon, I almost lost a new client because I couldn't finish before their photographer arrived. I made it by maybe 4 minutes, with sweat running into my eyes and Luis throwing damp towels into bags just to get them out of the shot. Laura saw the end of it. She didn't say anything in front of the client. She waited until we were alone by my van. What would it take, she asked, for you to stop operating like every day is a crisis? I laughed because the real answer felt too big. A different bank account. I'm serious. So am I. She leaned against the side of her SUV. Professional tank system. Better extractor. Proper hose reels. Branded wrap. Second setup for Luis. Scheduling software that isn't tape on your dashboard. I stared at her. You've been making a list? I listen when people tell me what's holding them back. That's not a small list. No, it isn't. I shut the van door harder than I meant to. Laura, I can help. The words hit me wrong, even though her voice was gentle. No, you didn't even hear the offer. I heard enough. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Don't do that. Do what? Act like I insulted you, because I noticed the obvious. I looked toward the street, then back at her. I'm not going to be some younger guy you fixed with a credit card. Her expression changed. Not hurt exactly, more like disappointed that I had gone there. That's what you think this is? I don't know what this is. Yes, you do. You're just scared of the part where it might be real. That made me angry, because it landed too close. I built this myself, and you should be proud of that. I am. But building something yourself doesn't mean refusing every door that opens. I didn't answer. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. I'm not buying you, Noah. I'm not managing you. I'm not turning you into a project. I'm telling you, your ability is bigger than your equipment, and I'd rather invest in that than watch you burn out proving a point. I wanted to believe her. That was the problem, because if she was wrong, I could keep my pride and my old van and my fear. But if she was right, then accepting help didn't make me weak. It meant I had to stop hiding behind survival, and I wasn't sure I knew how. I avoided the investment conversation for 2 days. That sounds cleaner than what I actually did. What I did was ignore one text, answer another like it was only about a Thursday appointment, and keep myself busy enough that I could pretend I wasn't thinking about Laura every time the van made a noise. She didn't chase me. That made it worse. Laura was good at pressure, but she didn't waste it. She just let the offer sit there between us while I drove around Charlotte with my old setup rattling behind me, trying to act like Pride could tighten bolts and unclog hoses. By Friday, Pride was not doing much. Luis and I had 5 jobs stacked too close together because I had started saying yes like a guy who believed he had a real business. First was a black Range Rover in South Park. Then 2 SUVs in Myers Park. Then a patio rinse before a listing preview. Then a last-minute interior job from one of Laura's agent contacts. The morning started fine. That was how bad days tricked you. By noon, the extractor was coughing again. By 1:30, the hose reel jammed so hard, Luis had to hold the van door open while I pulled line out by hand. By 3, the pump fittings started leaking under the tank, dripping water across the floor, soaking a bag of clean towels. I stood behind the van, staring at it, my hands wet, my jaw tight, while Luis watched me from the curb. "Bro," he said carefully, "we need better stuff." I looked at him. He raised both hands. "I'm just saying what the van is saying." I wanted to snap at him, but he wasn't wrong. The van was saying it loud. We finished the last job late. The client wasn't rude, but she did that tight, polite thing rich people do when they're already deciding whether you're worth calling again. I smiled, apologized, knocked $20 off the invoice, and drove away, feeling like I had swallowed a rock. I ended up at Laura's warehouse just after sunset. I didn't plan to go there. At least that's what I told myself. But my hands turned the wheel, and there I was, parked near the loading bay, with the van ticking as it cooled down. Laura was inside, standing at a long table with fabric samples spread around her. She looked up when I came in, and one look at me told her enough. "Bad day?" she asked. I gave a short laugh. "Depends how much you like water leaks." She set down the sample book. "What happened?" I told her. Not calmly. I paced while I talked. The pump, the extractor, the client, the towel bag, the late schedule, Luis having to work around me instead of with me. I hated how it sounded out loud, like I wasn't running a business, just dragging one behind me. Laura listened until I ran out of steam. Then she said, "What are you actually afraid of?" I leaned against the table and rubbed both hands over my face. "I told you." "No. You told me what you're mad about." "I asked what you're afraid of." I stared at the floor. The warehouse was quiet except for the hum of the lights and distant traffic outside. "I don't want people saying you bought me a business," I said. Her face didn't change. "And?" "I don't want to look at the van and feel like it stopped being mine." She waited. "I don't want to lose the one thing I had," I said. "Even when it was barely working, I built it. Every flyer, every client, every stupid repair in a parking lot. It was mine." Laura came around the table, but she didn't touch me yet. "Noah," she said, "clean paper keeps things honest." I looked up. We write it down. Loan amount, monthly payment, no ownership for me, no control over your schedule, no say in who you hire, no emotional strings. You pay it back like any other business debt, except the person making the loan already knows you're worth the risk. I breathed out slowly. You make it sound simple. It isn't simple. It's just clear. That's different. Yes. I looked at her then. Really looked at her. She wasn't glowing with some perfect answer. She was tired too. There were little lines near her eyes, and one of her earrings was missing. She had probably been fixing other people's beautiful rooms all day while carrying her own pressure around like it weighed nothing. You really think I can handle it? I asked. I think you're already handling more with less than most people would tolerate. That's not the same. No, she said. It's better. The next morning, we sat with a local accountant she knew, and everything got written out. Amount, repayment dates, terms, signatures. I read every line twice. Laura didn't rush me. She didn't smile like she had won. She just sat across from me, hands folded, letting me keep the dignity of making the choice myself. When I signed, my hand shook a little. Not because I regretted it, because it felt like stepping onto a bridge I had been staring at for years. The next few weeks moved fast. The new tank system was the first thing installed. Solid brackets, clean plumbing, no ugly knot holding my life together. Then came the extractor, strong enough that Luis actually laughed the first time he used it. Man, he said, looking at the carpet wand, this thing sounds serious. It better be, I said. It costs serious. The van wrap came last. Dark blue, simple letters, clean logo, phone number, website, Noah Hubley Mobile Detailing, not a faded plumbing shadow, not a side hustle hiding in traffic. My name on the side of something that looked like it belonged where it parked. The first morning I drove it through South Park. I kept glancing at the reflection in store windows. Luis caught me. You checking yourself out? Checking the branding. Sure. The work didn't become easy. That part surprised me even though it shouldn't have. Better equipment didn't make stains remove themselves, or clients stopped changing times. I still got soaked. I still ate in the van. I still had days where my shoulders ached by dinner. But the panic changed. That was the difference. If a hose acted up, I had another one. If Luis had a job across town, he had his own setup. If a client asked whether I could handle 2 vehicles and patio furniture before noon, I could say yes and mean it. Invoices got paid on time. Weekly accounts stayed weekly. Agents started booking ahead instead of begging last minute. I stopped checking my bank account like it was a warning light. And Laura stayed Laura. She still corrected me when I underpriced something. She still watched details. She still kissed me in quiet corners when nobody was around, then handed me a clipboard like she hadn't just made me forget my own schedule. The last job that summer was at another one of her staged properties, a black luxury car parked in front of a white brick house, not that different from the first one. I finished polishing the hood right before golden light hit the driveway. When I leaned down to check the paint, I caught my reflection in the black finish. I didn't look rich. I didn't look polished. My shirt was damp at the collar. My hands were tired, and there was still a streak of tire dressing on my forearm. But I didn't look scared. That stopped me for a second. Laura came outside, carrying 2 cold drinks. Her hair was loose that day, red against a white blouse, and she walked toward me like she had every right to be part of the scene. She handed me one. "You look different," she said. "New shirt?" "No." "Better van?" "That helps." I smiled and looked toward the street. "What then?" She stood beside me, shoulder almost touching mine. "You look like you finally believe your own life." I took a drink, mostly so I wouldn't answer too fast. "The first day I came here," I said, "I thought neighborhoods like this were where I'd find out I didn't belong. Like, if I messed up, that was it. End of the road." Laura watched me quietly. I looked at my van, parked clean and straight at the curb, logo catching the light. Then at the schedule on my phone, full for the next 2 weeks. Then at her. Turns out it was the road opening. Her hand found mine. No big speech. No dramatic promise. Just her fingers sliding between mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. And that was when I understood it fully. Laura hadn't just wanted me when the house was empty and the night got quiet. She had believed in the part of me I was still too tired to see. Not as a rescue, not as a favor, as a bet. On my hands, my name, my work, my future. I stood there with my van behind me, a full schedule ahead of me, and Laura beside me. And for the first time in a long time, my life didn't feel like something I was barely keeping alive. It felt like something being built,